In today's video, we will be bringing you the latest Jamaica COVID-19 travel updates as of October 10th, 2020 for both residents and non-residents and based on guidelines from the Ministry of Health and the Jamaica Tourist Board. This is Karen from Trending Travel, back with another quality video. Now, I love going to the beach. I also love dogs. But I also love sharing knowledge and information. The worst kind of people, apart from the people who just walk extremely slow on the sidewalk, are those who refuse to share information. Lucky for you, you're at the right place. The bottom line is, I love sharing knowledge and information, but I also go above and beyond to ensure that the information that is brought to you is accurate and will be helpful. I get a deep sense of fulfillment in knowing that I have helped someone else along the way. And this is why I strongly agree with this quote. As a general rule, the most successful man in life is the man who has the best information. At the end of this video, you will clearly understand what to do and make better travel plans about traveling to Jamaica. I will be discussing all you need to know before arrival and on arrival in Jamaica, the rules, restrictions, and more. This update will be applicable up to October 31st, 2020 and possibly further. As usual, I will post new updates as soon as they become available. Also, before I continue, please stop what you're doing and subscribe to my channel. Not just because I ask you nicely, but because I plan to make more travel related and important travel update videos and you do not want to miss out. So, let's jump right in. Like most countries, the Jamaican authorities have established a controlled re-entry process which includes registration and approval. Now, let's take a look at the Jamaica re-entry process that is in effect as of October 10th, 2020. Number 1. Get a negative COVID-19 PCR or antigen test. Now, pre-testing for COVID-19 is not required for all persons traveling to Jamaica. So, who will need to do the COVID test? As of October 10th, 2020, only residents of the designated high-risk countries of the United States of America, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Mexico, or Panama who are 12 years of age or older will be required to obtain a COVID-19 PCR or antigen test. Travelers from all other countries do not need to get a negative COVID test. Also, travelers who are Jamaican residents do not need to get a negative COVID test. Please note that Panama has now been added to Jamaica's list of designated high-risk countries. After getting your negative COVID-19 test result, a printed or electronic copy of the test result must be presented to the airline representative in order to complete your check-in process for your flight to Jamaica. Please note that persons traveling to Jamaica are no longer required to upload the negative COVID-19 test results. So, let's talk about the COVID-19 test requirements. You must do the right COVID test. Here is a full list of acceptable test types: the PCR test, the NAAT test, an RNA or molecular test, or an antigen test. Previously, the antigen test was not an acceptable test type, but now the antigen test is accepted. Also, please note the following. On the results with samples from the long throat swab and from the back of the nose and throat will be accepted for the PCR test, while on the results with samples from the back of the nose and throat will be accepted for the antigen test. Antibody test and home-based test kits will not be accepted. Next, you must use the right lab. So you can't just get a test from any lab. The test must be conducted by a medical laboratory with credentials or qualifications from one of the following: registered by the CLIA or with ISO 15189 certification. Additionally, the antigen test must be approved by the World Health Organization the Pan American Health Organization, or the United States Food and Drug Administration. Next, you must do the COVID test at the right time. If your COVID test is done earlier than is required, your test will not be accepted for travel to Jamaica. The date of the sample collection must be less than 10 days from the date of travel to Jamaica. For example, if you're traveling on October 20th, the earliest the test sample may be collected is October 11th. For your precise testing date, you may also use the test date calculator found at visitjamaica.com. You can find a link in the description below. Now, what should be shown on the COVID test result document? The test result sheet should display the following information: the name of the individual tested. This should be the same name on the travel authorization application. The date of birth of the person tested. Again, this should be the same date of birth as on the travel authorization. The name of the testing lab, an indication of the lab credentials, date of sample collection, type of test, type of sample, and the test result, which of course should be negative. Number 2. Get a travel authorization. All persons traveling to Jamaica will need to apply for a travel authorization. You will not need the travel authorization to book your flight. However, it is a requirement during the check-in process and for boarding your flight. With this being said, note that the airlines will not allow passengers to board their flight to Jamaica without the travel authorization. So, let's look at how to apply for the travel authorization. For non-residents, the travel authorization application should be submitted within the 5-day period before your intended travel date. When applying for the travel authorization, you will need your passport information, your flight details, and the name and address of your place of stay in Jamaica. Now, the application process for residents and non-residents are a bit different. So, let's look at the application process for residents. First, go online to jamcovid19.moh.gov.jm. Click Continue, then click on Immigration. Next, click Yes to indicate that you live in Jamaica. Next, enter your email address. A one-time password will be sent to your email to authenticate your account. Next, fill in your personal information as requested, such as name, date of birth, passport number, location, and so on. Answer the health questions. Provide the home quarantine assessment information. Provide consent to a series of declarations. Provide immigration and customs info. Note that this can also be provided afterwards at enterjamaica.com. Then submit your application. During the review of your application, you may be requested to provide any missing information or additional details. Within 5 to 10 minutes of submission of your application, an assessment response will be generated and sent to your registered email address. If your travel authorization is approved, you will receive the notification by email. You must also keep a printed or electronic copy of your travel authorization along with your airline ticket and passport in order to check in and board your flight. Again, please be reminded that you will not be able to board your flight without your travel authorization. Before you board your flight, I suggest that you fill out the Immigration and Customs Declaration form online at enterjamaica.com. Now, let's look at the travel authorization application process for non-residents. First, go online to visitjamaica.com. After clicking No to indicate that you do not live in Jamaica, you will enter your email address. A one-time password will be sent to your email to authenticate your account. Next, fill in your personal, health, and intended place of stay in Jamaica information. Next, provide consent and declaration. Complete the Immigration and Customs form. Then finally, submit your application. During the review process, You also may be requested to provide any missing information or additional details. An assessment response will be generated and sent to your registered email within 5 to 10 minutes of submission of your application. If for some reason the approval process is taking longer than expected, it is recommended that you check your email regularly, both your inbox as well as your spam mail, or send an email to the travel approval team at travelapprovals.jam@moh.gov.jm. You may also call or send a WhatsApp message to their hotline numbers. You will find all of these details in the description below. If you are approved, you will receive an email with your travel authorization. If you received your travel authorization, you will need to show your saved version along with your passport and ticket to an airline agent at check-in or when boarding your flight. And number 3, download the Jamcovid-19 app. The Jamcovid-19 app is used for information, monitoring, self-reporting, and for tracking purposes by the Jamaican health authorities in order to track the movement of mainly returning Jamaican residents. However, persons staying outside of the resilient corridor are required to use the Jamcovid-19 app so that the authorities can track their movements. Additionally, the entire process from application to approval to completing the immigration and customs declarations form can be managed online through the app. Installing it before travel will save on airport processing time. You can download the Jamcovid-19 app from the Google Play Store or App World onto your mobile phone. So, let's look at what happens on arrival in Jamaica. In order to know what happens after you arrive in Jamaica and what rules will apply to you, you will first need to know what category of traveler you are. The Jamaican authorities have placed travelers to Jamaica into 4 categories. One of these categories is for Jamaican residents, while the other 3 categories are for non-residents. Therefore, let's break this down further by discussing the risk-based testing and quarantine protocols for each category of travelers on arrival in Jamaica. Please note that regardless of category, all travelers should expect to do a health screening and risk assessment at the airport. The health screening will include temperature checks, observation of symptoms, as well as a short interview with a health officer. The risk assessment will determine the applicable testing and quarantine measures, while the sensitization session will advise travelers of the various infection prevention protocols within Jamaica, such as the usual washing and sanitizing of hands, wearing face masks in public, social distancing, gathering restrictions, and curfew hours. Note that based on the assessment, some travelers may require no testing at all, while some may require airport testing, while others may be required to make an appointment at one of the government testing labs. Now, let's look at Category 1. These are residents of Jamaica. On arrival in Jamaica, expect to do a health screening and risk assessment as mentioned previously. Will you need a COVID test when you get to Jamaica? If you are assessed as a low-risk traveler, the answer is no. However, travelers who are Jamaican residents may be required to do a COVID-19 PCR test if assessed as high risk as a result of showing symptoms, exposure to persons who have tested positive, belonging to a high-risk group, or other risk factors. If persons are required to be tested and their test is negative, they will be required to complete their quarantine at home for 14 days from their date of entry to Jamaica. If the test is positive, they will be isolated either at home or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. So, will you be quarantined if you were assessed as a low-risk traveler? Yes, all Jamaican residents will be quarantined whether or not they are assessed as low-risk or high-risk or required to be tested. Therefore, You will be required to remain in quarantine at home for 14 days from your date of entry to Jamaica. Now we'll discuss the general quarantine rules for Jamaican residents. Persons will be required to stay at home for 14 days from their date of entry to Jamaica. During this time, your movements and interaction with others will be limited. Persons will be allowed to leave their home only once per day to go to the closest location for the purpose of obtaining food, medical supplies, or medical services, conducting financial transactions, overseeing their place of business, attending a place of worship, and physical exercise. Next, we will look at category number 2. These are non-resident tourism visitors staying within the Resilient Corridor. You will find a list of approved Resilient Corridor accommodations at visitjamaica.com. This brings us to address a very important question. What is the Resilient Corridor? The Resilient Corridor is simply the designated COVID safe zone areas along Jamaica's coastline that has been approved by the Jamaican government for tourism purposes. Within the Resilient Corridor, there are several approved accommodations and attractions that are COVID compliant according to government standards and can accept tourist visitors. The North Coast Corridor stretches from Negril in Westmoreland to Port Antonio in Portland, while the South Coast Corridor stretches from Milk River in Clarendon to Negril in Westmoreland. Now, let's look at the travel protocols on arrival in Jamaica for non-residents staying within the Resilient Corridor. As previously mentioned, expect to do a health screening and risk assessment. Will you need a COVID test at the airport? Well, based on the health screening and risk assessment on arrival, persons may still be required to be tested at the airport or at a designated facility despite presenting a negative COVID-19 test result. In this case, persons would await their test result in their hotel room. For persons who do not require testing or whose test is negative, they would remain at their hotel or resort within the Resilient Corridor and would be restricted to the property for the duration of their stay. Persons are allowed to leave the property to visit COVID-19 approved attractions such as Dolphin Cove, Duns River Falls, and so on. However, if the test is positive, persons would be isolated either at the hotel or resort or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. Now let's look at category 3. These are non-residents visiting Jamaica for business purposes for less than 14 days. Let's look at the travel protocols on arrival in Jamaica for non-resident business travelers. Expect to do a health screening and risk assessment at the airport. Will you need a COVID test at the airport? Well, previously, all business travelers were tested for COVID-19 on arrival at the airport in Jamaica. According to guidelines from the Jamaica Tourist Board, as of October 10, 2020, business travelers from high-risk areas should expect that they may be tested at the airport. If tested, they will await their test results at their hotel or intended address. If the test result is negative, they would be released from quarantine and be placed under certain rules for a period of 14 days from their date of entry into Jamaica, or for the duration of their stay if it is shorter than 14 days. Now, these are the quarantine rules for business travelers. If the duration of their stay is shorter than 14 days, they will be allowed to leave once per day to obtain food and medical supplies and to conduct their business meetings and financial transactions, following which they must return immediately. They are required to observe all COVID safety protocols in Jamaica, such as wearing a mask in public places and complying with the physical distancing rule. Other additional rules include not being allowed to attend any meeting, event, or gathering of more than 20 persons, meeting with persons aged 65 and over, or taking any form of transportation with any other passenger other than with a person with whom they have traveled to Jamaica. However, if the test result is positive, they would be isolated either at their hotel or intended address or in a government facility as determined by the health authorities. And Category 4. These are non-residents visiting Jamaica for other purposes including tourism, but not staying within the Resilient Corridor. So, here are the travel protocols on arrival in Jamaica for persons in Category 4. Expect to do a health screening and risk assessment at the airport. Will you need a COVID test at the airport? Again, if assessed as high risk on arrival, persons will be required to do a COVID-19 test. Persons will then await their test results under quarantine at their intended address. Whether or not persons are required to be tested, or if tested and the test is negative, persons will be required to remain in quarantine at home for 14 days or for the duration of their stay from their date of entry to Jamaica. However, if the test is positive, they would be isolated either at home or in a government facility as determined by the Jamaican health authorities. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. If you find this new update helpful, like the video, let us know in the comments, and subscribe to our channel for more important travel updates. If you decide to visit Jamaica, stay safe and have fun. Hopefully from this video, you will have a much clearer understanding of the latest Jamaica COVID-19 travel protocols, and ultimately, you will be able to make better travel plans. Remember, Jamaica or other destinations could make travel changes or close their borders at any time. Therefore, please accept full responsibility to seek up-to-date information about all possible risks before making any bookings or other arrangements. See you in our next video.